For every amazing MCU movie, there is also one that is utter garbage. And here are the 8 most loved and most hated MCU movies. Starting off, we have Avengers Infinity War. This movie is peak Marvel, and I still remember walking out of the theater being in a state of absolute shock. But before Infinity War, we had 10 years of build-up, 10 years of post-credit scenes, and teasing Thanos like he was the big boss waiting at the end of a video game. And when he finally showed up, Marvel did something bold. They made the villain the main character, and that is why this movie hits so hard. It is Thanos' story, not the Avengers. And half the time you're thinking, wait, is Thanos actually cooking? And holy shit, bro, the battles were epic. And RIP to my boy Hulk. He got folded like a lawn chair. You had Wakanda, and you had Doctor Strange throwing every spell in his book like it was a Pokemon battle. And even with all that, Thanos just walked through it with ease. But the moment that made Infinity War legendary was the ending. The theater was completely silent, and I remember looking around and seeing people with their jaws on the floor. And from a theater roaring when Thor arrived in Wakanda to absolute silence when the movie ended, it was a surreal and odd feeling. And this was part 1 of the climax of the entire Infinity Saga. And it was not just a movie, it was an event. It made every Marvel fan feel like they were part of something bigger, and especially Soups. And all I can tell you is that everyone at my lunch table at school was talking about it. But Infinity War raised the bar so high, and Marvel has been trying to climb back up ever since. This is more than evident with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Because wow, talk about a movie that had all the potential in the world and then just collapsed in on itself like one of Kang's timelines. And the trailers made this look epic, and even a little Avengers level. But the actual movie? It felt more like a 2-hour CGI theme park ride, and it made you feel like you overdosed on acid. And look, I wanted to love it. I like Paul Rudd, and I like the Ant-Man movies for being smaller scale and fun, but Quantumania threw all of that charm out the window, and it decided to go full Star Wars prequel with the Quantum Realm. Whole sections of the movie looked like cutscenes from a PS3 game, and not even a good one. More like the bargain bin kind you would find at GameStop for $3, and for a film that was supposed to raise the stakes, it just felt empty, and even Kang, who should have been terrifying, got done dirty. Bruh. Jonathan Majors gave a strong performance, but I personally never connected with his Kang. He was never intimidating enough, and it is honestly for the best that Marvel's moving forward with Doctor Doom instead. Kang was supposed to be the next Thanos, but when your big new villain gets beaten by a bunch of ants, you can't just come back from that. And let's not even start on MODOK. What the hell? And where the hell was Luis? One of the best things about the Ant-Man movies was his hilarious storytelling, and his absence in Quantumania somehow just made the movie feel even more lifeless. But the saddest part is Ant-Man was never meant to carry the entire MCU on his back, and yet Marvel shoved him into that role, and it backfired spectacularly. Quantumania is a symbol of how messy and directionless Marvel's storytelling has gotten since Endgame. And when you stack that up against something like Iron Man, the movie that started it all and did everything right, the contrast could not be more obvious. But before I continue, please like and subscribe. Okay, now this movie is not just loved, it is legendary. Back in 2008, nobody thought Marvel could pull this off. Robert Downey Jr. was considered a risky pick. The studio was still finding its footing, and superhero movies were nowhere near the juggernauts they are today. But then Iron Man hit theaters, and it did not just stick the landing, it built the entire runway for everything that came after.
It was perfect.
Robert Downey Jr. absolutely owned the role of Tony Stark. The charm, the wit, the sarcasm, and the humanity. It all clicked. And can you actually imagine any other actor playing Tony Stark? No, you can't. And the crazy thing is that performance carried so much weight that Marvel built an entire universe around him. Without RDJ, there would be no Avengers, no Infinity Saga, and no MCU as we know it. And therefore, the whole movie industry would be vastly different. And let's not forget that this was Marvel before Disney, and before massive CGI slugfests. Iron Man was a character-driven story with just the right amount of action. The suit-up scenes felt groundbreaking, and the CGI was so good, and the cultural impact cannot be overstated. Marvel took Iron Man, who was a B-list character, and turned him into the face of an entire generation of movies. It was lightning in a bottle, and even now, after more than 15 years, it remains one of the most beloved MCU films ever made. And when you look at how perfectly Iron Man launched the MCU, it makes something like Thor: Love and Thunder feel like a cruel joke in comparison. And wow. Talk about a movie that felt like Marvel was trolling us. If Iron Man was Marvel firing on all cylinders, this was Marvel hitting the self-destruct button. Taika Waititi got extremely high on the success of Ragnarok, and then completely ruined Thor's character in the process. And for someone who loved Ragnarok, I was initially excited because Taika found the right balance of comedy and epicness, and it gave Thor new life as a character. But with Love and Thunder, he ruined everything, and I will never forgive him. This man's understanding of comedy is equivalent to Nyan Cat. Every emotional moment got undercut by a joke. Most of the humor landed like a bad TikTok skit, and the endless screaming goats became torture after the first 30 seconds. Combine that with some of the worst CGI Marvel has ever put on screen. Seriously, that floating head looked like a shitty Snapchat filter from 2015, and it hurts even more because Christian Bale as Gore the God Butcher could have been one of the greatest villains in the MCU. He looked terrifying, but the movie gave him barely any screen time, and when he was on screen, it was a big fat joke. How on earth do you waste Christian Bale as a villain? And even Natalie Portman's return as Jane Foster could have been powerful, but instead, Marvel decided to give in to the mob. And the thing about Love and Thunder is that it was not just bad, it was embarrassing. Embarrassing! It turned Thor, who was supposed to be one of the strongest Avengers, into a clown in his own movie. And this is why the next film on our list, Thor, Ragnarok, feels like it came from a completely different universe, even though the same dude made it. Before this movie, Thor's solo films were kind of the weak link of the MCU. The first Thor was fine, the Dark World was, well, let's just not even go there. But then Ragnarok came in, flipped the script, and made Thor fun.
Huh? Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool!
The tone in this movie was spot on. It was colorful, and it was hilarious, and it had real stakes. The jokes actually landed without undercutting the drama, and unlike Love and Thunder, the CGI and visuals here looked amazing. The arena fight between Thor and Hulk felt like something ripped straight out of a comic book panel. The cast was on fire too. Jeff Goldblum as the Grandmaster was perfectly weird, and I mean, I don't understand how you can hate on Jeff Goldblum, I just don't. And Cate Blanchett as Hela was great too. She was everything Gore should have been in Love and Thunder, and at the heart of it all was Chris Hemsworth finally being allowed to shine as Thor. For the first time, he wasn't stiff or overly serious. He was funny, charismatic, and still badass. This was what Thor fans had been waiting for, and it completely revitalized the character heading into Infinity War. And in hindsight, his arc in Ragnarok and Infinity War is peak Marvel. But that's why it's so frustrating that Marvel and Taika took everything that worked here, and then threw it straight in the trash with Love and Thunder. And speaking of things that did not work, the next movie on our list is Eternals. And oh boy, where do I even start with that one? I hate this movie. This is the worst MCU movie ever made. It just sucks ass. And at least Love and Thunder had a few moments you could laugh at, but Eternals gave us nothing.
Brother, this guy stinks!
This movie was 2.5 hours of boredom. Marvel dumped 10 new characters on us with no build-up and expected us to care, but every single one of them felt wooden and lifeless. I could not even remember half their names walking out of the theater. The pacing dragged forever, and the flashbacks killed all momentum, and the story had less energy than the Mandarin reveal in Iron Man 3. The Deviants were forgettable, and the Celestials looked cool, but only for like 30 seconds. And the saddest part is Marvel tried to sell Eternals as bold, artistic, and the future of the MCU, but it ended up a bloated mess with zero identity. It was boring, it was lifeless, and honestly, it might be the only MCU movie I would never watch again. Which is why, when we talk about one of the best MCU movies, Captain America the Winter Soldier, the difference is night and day. This movie completely redefined Steve Rogers, and I'll be honest, before this film, I thought Cap was kind of the grandpa Avenger. He had the shield, the old school morals, and not much else. But here, the Russos turned him into one of the most layered characters in the MCU, and they gave him the Thor Ragnarok treatment 3 years before Ragnarok even came out. Steve wasn't just a man out of time anymore, he was a soldier trying to figure out who to trust in a world where everything was corrupt, and I really enjoyed watching him go from Uncle Sam's bitch to tearing S.H.I.E.L.D. apart from the inside. And this was the Russo brothers' first Marvel movie, which blows my mind. They walked in, dropped the elevator fight, the Hydra twist, and that brutal highway battle, and the tone was sharp. The action had real weight, and there was no cartoony CGI holding it back. For me, The Winter Soldier is the movie that made Captain America cool. And when a film can do that while still feeling like a political thriller with superheroes sprinkled in, that's when you know Marvel struck gold. And then Marvel said, okay, now let's try the same with Captain Marvel. And well, that did not exactly go the same way.
No. Wait.
This movie sucks, plain and simple. The only reason it made $1 billion is because Marvel sandwiched it right before Endgame. They could have released 2 hours of Kevin Feige pooping and it still would have made bank because fans were desperate for anything leading into the finale. But the movie itself, it was lifeless. Carol Danvers was written as the most one-dimensional character in the MCU. She starts the movie super powerful and she ends the movie even more powerful. And in between, there's no real arc, no growth, nothing to make us care about her. It felt like Marvel just said, here's your new face of the MCU, deal with it.
What?
And look, I'm not against female heroes, Black Widow, Wanda, even Gamora. They all have depth and flaws that make them human. But Carol? She was written like a woke checklist instead of an actual character. They gave her the Rey treatment from The Force Awakens, and the movie was trying so hard to make her the most important Avenger that it forgot to make her even slightly interesting. And even the supporting cast couldn't save it. Nick Fury got reduced to being her sidekick, the Skrulls were wasted, and that whole eye reveal was one of the dumbest things Marvel has ever done. A cat scratch? Really? That was supposed to be epic? And the saddest part is that Captain Marvel could have been a great origin story, but instead it was rushed, it was political, and it was flat out boring. And the contrast becomes crystal clear when you look at a film like Guardians of the Galaxy, which introduced a bunch of brand new characters nobody cared about, and then made them instant fan favorites in just 2 hours. James Gunn, God bless him, gave us 5 weirdos, and he threw them together, and somehow made us care about every single one of them. The reason it worked is that the Guardians had flaws, and they had humor, and they had heart. Star-Lord was immature, Rocket was bitter, Drax was hilarious without even trying, Groot was pure wholesomeness, and Gamora kept them grounded. By the end, they weren't just a team, they felt like a family, and on top of that, the soundtrack turned into its own character, giving the movie a style and personality no other MCU film had at the time. And that's what Captain Marvel and Eternals completely missed. Gunn gave his characters personalities we connected with, not just a checklist of powers. He made us laugh. And then he hit us with real emotion, like Groot's sacrifice, all while making a raccoon and a tree, 2 of the most loved MCU characters ever. Ladies and gentlemen, that is talent. Guardians of the Galaxy was fresh, and it was creative, and it proved that Marvel could take the most random characters and make them mainstream, which makes it all the more disappointing when we get to Black Widow, a movie that should have been a powerful send-off for Natasha, but instead ended up being one of the most forgettable MCU entries ever.
You don't want to be like this.
And honestly, this one just hurts. Natasha Romanoff was one of the original Avengers, one of the most important characters in the entire Infinity Saga, and she never got her own solo movie until after she was already dead. Like, what was the point? This should have been a powerful, emotional send-off, but instead, it felt like Marvel just checked a box and threw us a filler story nobody really asked for. The timing was awful, and coming 2 years after Endgame made it feel completely irrelevant, and the story didn't add anything meaningful to Natasha's legacy. Even the villains were a letdown. Taskmaster could have been an all-time great, but instead got turned into one of the blandest characters Marvel has ever put on screen. And while Florence Pugh's Yelena was the clear standout and basically stole the whole movie, that just made Natasha feel like a side character in her own story, and the whole film ended up being forgettable, which is the worst thing you can say about a character as important as Black Widow. She deserved better than this half-hearted send-off. And yeah, that's it. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know what MCU movies you hate or love. And check out my latest video right here.